Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Passwords Journal. Before we start, I just want to say this episode is sponsored by Dongani Studios. Guys, girls, and everybody in between. Do you need a wardrobe refresh? Why not try Dongani Studios? Dongani and I decided to team up to give you guys 10% off your very first order. That includes the shirts, jackets, jerseys, and the bracelets. Go to DonganiStudios.com and put in code capital P for SSWRD to get 10% off. Now, let's get back to the show that you guys have been waiting for. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Passwords Journal. Today, we have an absolute powerhouse of a man. We have a trainer, a businessman, a champion in multiple different facets. It's Jimmy House. How you doing today, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate that, man.
Of course.
We're gonna start with a little bit of an easier question. What
Yeah.
got you into, wrestling, jujitsu, and bodybuilding?
Yeah. So I started lifting when I was a kid at age 5. My dad started training me at a really young age. It was one of those things where he started training when he was relatively young, and when he thought that I was essentially old enough to start learning how to lift weights, he started teaching me the ropes, and I took that. That led into football, wrestling, jujitsu, bodybuilding, as you mentioned. When I started going into high school, I started wrestling. I took one of the summers to actually compete in a bodybuilding show. And after I graduated high school and got through high school wrestling, that's when jujitsu became really appealing. So that became my endeavor for the next 6 years after that. And then after I got my black belt, I decided I wanted to pursue something greater with my life. And I've said this on many podcasts now, but my essential goal with professional wrestling is to become a superhero to millions of kids. And so that is my manifestation when it comes to professional wrestling, life, anything that I accomplish to add to that overall collections of kids that look up to me.
Wow, that's actually a great answer, man.
Thank you.
I showed my little brother a few clips of you wrestling, and he's already a huge fan. He's already
Oh,
watched
thank you.
your most recent match.
Oh, that means a
But
lot. Thank you, man.
yeah, of course. And back in 2017, speaking of jujitsu, back in 2017, you won the AGF Phoenix Championship. So just like walk me through on how you did it and how that win felt like.
Yeah, I mean, so that one in particular, I'm impressed that you went back that far, but that one in particular is no big competition by any means. That's just a local competition. That was like my second competition ever. I was a white belt. I did well, obviously. I won every single match in that one, but that one is not necessarily anything to parade by any means. It was just kind of part of my earlier journey of jujitsu.
Yeah, but I mean, like any goal is impressive. So, like, how did that help you? How did that help motivate you through like just continuing to pursue jujitsu and getting your black belt
Well,
eventually?
yeah, my biggest thing with jujitsu was it was parlaying off of effective failure with my high school wrestling experience because I was ranked the number one wrestler in the state going into my senior year for my weight class, and I was doing really well throughout the season, upholding that number one ranking. And then towards the end of the season, 6 days out of state, I had a major concussion, so that took me out of state, so I couldn't wrestle in state. So then, after I graduated high school, I competed in powerlifting for a long time, but I never had that same fulfillment that wrestling gave me, even doing something as exciting as powerlifting. So when jujitsu became a thing, and I started training jujitsu, and I started competing, and I started having some of that earlier success, such as this tournament that you're bringing up, winning things like that was something that just gave me more motivation and drive to see what my potential was with jujitsu because I felt like I didn't see my full potential through with wrestling. So
Hmm.
jujitsu was a way to kind of extend my wrestling, take my wrestling skill set and expand upon it a bit. And, in a short 5, 6 years, I did do quite a bit. I didn't accomplish everything that I wanted to do, but I did have a lot of really cool memories. I got to meet a lot of really cool people. And that jujitsu is essentially what brought me to Austin, Texas, where I'm at now. And of course, that's where I'm pursuing my professional wrestling career.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already almost answered my question, but I was about to ask, well, how did jujitsu and wrestling eventually
hmm
help you to, become a professional wrestler and even your bodybuilding career? How did that help?
Yeah, so I've been working professional wrestling shows for 10 months, so not that much experience. I started wrestling a couple years ago in total, right, with a couple major knee injuries. So that being said, the bodybuilding, the weightlifting, the jujitsu, the amateur wrestling, even though I haven't been practicing professional wrestling for that long, all of those skills leading up to this point have definitely made my professional wrestling experience go a little bit smoother than what you traditionally would be less than a year in. And I try to say that humbly because, I got a long, long way to go. There's a lot of things about the business that I still do not understand. But that being said, a lot of the big beginner stuff, such as the physical stuff that you do in the ring, is a lot easier to do when you've been wrestling or doing jujitsu for the better half of the last decade and a half, right? And even before that, as a kid doing martial arts, I've always had the human body as kind of like this clay sculpture that I've always messed around with, whether it was karate as a kid, judo a little bit as a kid, obviously with wrestling and different sports like football. But then that bleeds into amateur wrestling and jujitsu, where you just become very familiar with what the human body is and how to manipulate that in any given way that you're asked of. And so professional wrestling is very similar to jujitsu and amateur wrestling, just with a few different twists, obviously. But it makes the learning process much more expedited.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I mean, I personally have a friend who's working to be a professional wrestler.
Awesome.
So, yeah, you've been, wrestling a little longer than him. So, if you had one piece of advice to give to him, what would that be?
So, something that has become very apparent to me is the most amount of experience that you're going to gain is going to be when you're working shows. Because I had trained wrestling about a year and a half before I ever started working a show. I had two major knee injuries. One took me out for about 9 months, the other took me out for about like 7 months, just about. So I had a couple big gaps, but I had about a year and a half of experience practicing wrestling before I started actually working shows. And prior to that, you try to gain as much of a clear consensus of what the basics are before you go into your first show. But I can tell you very confidently that the more that you're working shows, the more of that real time experience you're going to gain. Because something I learned, say, from my coach back home, Don Vitale in Phoenix, or my current coach, Dustin Rhodes, or some of the mentors that I've learned from in the past, such as Kofi Kingston, Brian Cage, Goldberg, Chris Bay, Alex Hammerstone, these different guys. The biggest thing that they're always relaying their wrestling to, their in-ring stuff to, is what the fans are looking for, what the fans want, how to get a reaction of the fans, how to make the fans feel something, right? And so when you're in a practice setting, like in a gym, it's very, very hard to replicate that, especially when you're doing a wrestling match in front of other wrestlers. They may be playing along, trying to pretend that they're a crowd, but deep down, we all know that it's not the same thing as working in front of an actual crowd. And the reason why that's important is because what you're learning in practice, you're kind of practicing what you're expecting to look well or get a good response from an actual fan base, but you won't know what actually works until you get in front of one. And what works in front
Mhm.
of one may not work in front of another. And this is where, the concept of being able to have improv and work on the fly is super important because you could have a match planned out to a T and you could have perfect memory, but something can happen in the middle of the match that calls for some sort of audible. And if you don't have the real time experience working live, it's going to be hard to make those adjustments real time. And to me, from what I've learned, that would be the biggest difference from, say, people on the independent scene or, say, people on that are just starting with WWE, for example, versus the people that are on the main show versus the people that are 15, 20 years in. These people can call a match in the back for all of about maybe 5 minutes, go out and have a banger of a match with barely even talking about it, right? Because they're just listening to the crowd. And so,
100%.
yeah, this is a very long, drug out answer, but my best advice to your friend or anybody else getting involved with professional wrestling is once you get the basics down and you're able to safely work with somebody in the ring, then your next goal should be to get as much in-ring working experience as you can with some thought as to what shows are right for you, what shows make sense, but getting as many real-time reps as you can is going to be what makes the biggest difference.
Yeah, just the perfect answer, man. Um, and you mentioned these big names earlier, like a Dustin Rhodes, Goldberg. Who's been your favorite person to work with in the wrestling business, and how do you build those connections?
Yeah, so it's hard to really say. Each relationship I have with each one of these individuals is very unique, and I can't say that I appreciate one any more than the other. They all just kind of collectively kind of help define my story up to the point to where I'm at now. Goldberg, I'm sure you've figured this out at this point, is the person that I was literally idolizing since I was 3 years old. He was my childhood hero. He's definitely the reason why I even thought to pursue professional wrestling to have this type of impact on kids because effectively, professional wrestling for me was my way of being able to do what Goldberg did to me, but to others. And so he's definitely my initial motivation. Nobody can take that away. But then when it comes to, people like Dustin Rhodes and Brian Cage and Kofi Kingston and Chris Bay more recently, guys like that, I can't tell you how lucky I am. Even Mark Henry, I can't tell you how lucky I am to be able to be in the atmosphere that they're in, being in Austin, Texas. Right, this is all kind of a geographic phenomenon for myself
Hmm.
to be able to benefit from the knowledge that these people have. Dustin for me was a connection that was made through Brian Cage. Brian Cage was a connection made through a good friend in our lifting space named CT Fletcher. Dustin, being at his school, obviously he's a coach of mine, so I get to learn a lot from him. Kofi was literally somebody that I met because we went to the same barber shop in Austin. And one of the barbers had told him that a new up and coming wrestler was also going to the barber shop. So Kofi literally went out of his way to get my number, then shoot me a text. And since that day, like 2 years ago, I've sent him countless matches, and he'll go through timestamp a full 20, 30-minute match, minute by minute of things that I should have done better, could have done better, things I did well,
Wow.
whatever the case may be. I remember meeting up with Kofi for the first time at a skate park where he brought his son to kind of play around and ride his board. And I had him review my first ever match that I did for Dustin. It was a student show, so there wasn't even a live fan base there at the time. And I remember just sitting there in awe, obviously, because Kofi Kingston's somebody that I've been watching since I was, maybe 11, 12 years old. But past that, that first time with Kofi was when I think I first realized like how deep this wrestling thing really is. Going into that match, I was very, very adamant on making sure that we had everything memorized and I wasn't going to mess up on anything. But then as Kofi was going through which stuff that was honestly just relatively basic, but the way that his mind thought about things in depth was my first kind of exposure to damn this wrestling thing, like it goes really deep, and there's even more than I don't know that I don't realize right now in this moment. So yeah, man. And then Mark Henry was I had his son Jacob on Instagram. We had followed each other. I had seen his lifting videos online. He had seen mine, and I had put like a poll up one day for people that wanted to work with me as a coach. And he had sent an inquiry in, and then we reached out, and then made it happen. I started training Jacob, leading into him going into his freshman year at OU for wrestling. Now he's playing football. And since then, Mark has done a hell of a lot to help me on the independent scene, to connect me with particular people, to help me get on particular cards and different things like that. So, yeah, I'm a very blessed individual to have access to these literal legends, people that I've been watching since before I was even 10 years old.
Wow, yeah. And speaking of Goldberg, I've been, I looked through your YouTube channel, and
Hmm.
one of your most viewed videos was talking about meeting your idol Goldberg. How was it
Hmm.
like not only meeting him but eventually helping him train for his retirement match?
Yeah, so a couple things on that. I'm sure you saw the video like of me actually meeting them, or you at least saw the
Yeah.
thumbnail. Yeah, it's on there. That still to this day probably top 1 to 3 days of my life. Maybe the best day of my life so far. To be honest with you, the second or third would be the one where he invites me to go to SmackDown. This is when he had his feud with the Fiend. And
Hmm.
he basically, long story short, he had his skit with the Fiend, and then he walks towards the back as if he's leaving. But then when commercial cuts or comes on, he comes back out to the ring area and then comes to give me a hug, in front of the whole stadium. So that was a really cool moment for me because that was essentially what I wanted to live as I was a kid. So he has done a lot for me in regards to taking some of my literal childhood dreams and making them a reality as an adult. So it's very cool in that sense. As far as, after moving to Texas and some of the things I've been able to do with Goldberg and his family since then, he gave me the opportunity to help his son Gage in a lifting capacity. Prior to him going to Colorado to play football, I went up almost every weekend for the good part of the summer to help him with weightlifting essentially. And so that was a really cool experience, getting to get to know Gage, get to know Goldberg a lot better, obviously, getting to have dinner with his family, all these different things that are very mind-boggling to what my 3-year-old self would have thought if you were to tell me that I would ever be involved with Goldberg at that capacity. As far as being involved in his retirement match, I was involved from a lifting standpoint a little bit at the beginning. He and I had worked out a couple times. I was trying to be there to basically help, push him and motivate him a little bit. But honestly, he's more than capable to hang that on his own. There was a point there where I thought I was going to be wrestling with him in the ring with the Von Erichs, but unfortunately that did not go through. But yeah, I was involved to some degree at the beginning, enough for him to give me a shout out on Ariel Hawani's
Mhm.
ESPN show. So that was cool.
Yeah, I mean that's honestly how I first heard of you.
Yeah,
Because
thank
I
you.
was watching the ESPN show, and then eventually I saw, your ads on Instagram. How is it like to run like a weightlifting business, and how is that helps you um just improve in general?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, obviously, I've been lifting for a long time. So, I'm 29 now. I started lifting when I was 5. So, I'm almost 2.5 decades into this endeavor.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, when I moved from Arizona to Austin, the thing that I didn't necessarily anticipate was the way my coaching business was going to parlay into what would evolve to some of my early wrestling success or early wrestling connections. Because, when I moved to Austin, I knew that I had to create money somehow, right? And back home in Arizona, I had an in person clientele. I didn't have my online coaching business set up yet. But when I decided I wanted to move to Austin, that's when I knew I had to convert a lot of my in person clients to online and start promoting my online services to be able to sustain myself as I created a new life for myself here in Austin. And so once I got out here, that's where Austin in itself is a little bit different than Arizona. Both places I love tremendously, but in Austin, it's a relatively small city compared to Phoenix, in my opinion. But the amount of successful people that are of the top 0.001% in their given industries is insane, and it's definitely more than anything I've ever been exposed to. Whether it's the jiu-jitsu industry, the wrestling industry, this is where once I got myself a name as a strength coach out here, that's where I started to appeal to people that were very prominent in the jiu-jitsu world or the business world or in this case the wrestling world. And so if I had not set up my coaching business, then I do not think I would even be as far as what I am in my wrestling career,
Mhm.
because I've been able to use my coaching business, yes, as a way to sustain life, but also as a way to further network myself and create a higher set point of value for myself when it comes to other wrestlers. I remember at WrestleCon in Vegas this past year, I was in line to take a picture with RVD, and then Jinder Mahal was right next to him. And I obviously knew who Jinder Mahal was, but as I was approaching closer to RVD, he's like, "Hey, I love your videos online, blah blah blah," and it was crazy. Again, having Jinder Mahal recognize me from some of my training videos online, to know who I was, and then make a connection just from myself as a coach. So it's one of those things where, regardless of how far my wrestling career goes, I'm always going to be offering some sort of coaching service on my end, just because yeah, it's one of those things where that's also a strong passion of mine. And
Mhm.
I run a business with two of my best friends for the coaching business, and I've always wanted to create magnificent careers and lives for them through that. So yeah, the coaching business is here to stay, and I'm excited to see where it goes with the wrestling.
Yeah, and continuing on that kind of area, you last this last September you traveled to 4 different states to wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? how did you even manage to do that? And how did you manage to find the motivation to be like, man, I have to go over here and then over here in a few days?
Yep, yep. Yeah, so number one, the I have to accredit the coaching business to even make that possible. The coaching business on top of some very awesome sponsors that I have, Bailey and Bear Construction, Laren Dixon, and Rhino Details out of Arizona. Those are three sponsors that help me with travel when I have opportunities like that. And so it kind of goes back to the point that I made at the beginning. There's on the independent scene, Texas has a lot of opportunities. It's such a huge state. There's a lot of major cities. There's a lot of work to have here in Texas for sure. Like I said, I'm still relatively new. So as I'm networking myself on the Texas scene, because I've, built my business enough to do so, I do have the opportunity to travel once a month to Phoenix or to Vegas or to California to take advantage of opportunities that are being given to me because I have the business on my end to sustain that. So it is something that is very beneficial on my end because I'm able to get more experience without having to necessarily bargain with others with other promotions in Texas or have to wait for people to come knocking. I can be a little bit more aggressive as long as I'm willing to travel. And so those days can get long for sure. But I'm sure, you've heard countless stories, and any successful wrestler that has come up from the independents will tell you that that's just kind of the baseline of what you have to meet. So as tiring as it can be, as financially taxing as it can be, it's almost kind of a given. That's the bare minimum of what you should be willing to do.
Yeah. Um, so how's your business managed to expand since when you first started it? Because, at first it was, just you. How did you manage to have your friends help you and then manage to expand it to what it is today?
Yeah, so my friends have been with me since the start of it. It only became profitable for all of us more recently, but they've been helping me build it from the start. And we technically started as a small like lifting team, small little brand back in 2016, and then we started officially becoming a business in 2019, selling shirts. And then come 2022, 2023 is when we actually committed ourselves as an actual coaching platform. So when it comes to the growth of it, it's one of those things where initially the majority of my clients or people interested in my services were coming from the jiu-jitsu world. And so after two major knee injuries there and doing professional wrestling, I don't train jiu-jitsu as much as I once did. So nowadays it's pretty much the same thing, but professional wrestling. So the same reasons that jiu-jitsu people were seeking out my services a couple years ago is the same reason that professional wrestlers are seeking out my services now. And that's why I put together that ad that you saw because, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of really well-known, respected names. And, I want to be able to get my name out there and be known as somebody that is the go-to guy when it comes to strength and conditioning for professional wrestling because I have people that are Hall of Famers that put their trust in me. So I have very, very much confidence that, other people involved with professional wrestling can put their trust in me as well. So growing it has been just a tremendous set of ups and downs, learning not just the coaching side, but the business side. But through that, there's been a lot of learning lessons that have kind of built up to the success we're having now where, again, it's helped me expand myself as a coach, but it helped me expand my awareness to the world of professional wrestlers and professional wrestling fans. So it's a big net win overall.
Yeah, I mean, how have you even managed to find friends like that in the first place? Because we're just all lifting
Yeah.
together, and you're like, let's just start something and see how it goes.
Yeah, that's a great question because to your point, it's very rare to find friends that are willing to invest so much into this vision that at one point seemed so far away and it continues to get closer and closer with each passing day. But when we were kids, and when I say kids, like 19, 20, 21, when we were kids, we had this vision of what we wanted to do with it. And everybody, mostly everybody was on board, right? And we had myself and two other people stick through, people that understood that you have to, be willing to sacrifice, obviously, but with creating a business off of scratch, and especially a coaching business, you're going to have to eat shit for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody has to eat shit or for a long time, but the majority of people do. And honestly, because we ate shit for so long, I'm more grateful for it because the people that are here are the ones that really want it for sure. Like that's already
Hmm.
proven, right? But now that we've ate shit for so long, we've actually seen where our knowledge that we now accumulated is benefiting us, and B, we're more tough per se to be able to handle the weather that comes with running a coaching business like this. And as far as like where do you find friends like that? Well, one of them was a friend of mine that I literally lived across the street from age 6 all the way till age 26, where we moved to Austin together. My friend and business manager
Wow.
Matt. Yeah, so I've been friends with him for 25 years. So that's a unicorn in and of itself. And then my other business partner is a friend that I've been friends with since freshman year of high school wrestling. So it's interesting because, when we were kids, 18, 19 years old, wanting to do something like this, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. And there have been plenty of doubt from parents of these individuals not believing in my ability to create lives for them, from other people, from you name it, right? The countless doubts and your typical like hate or whatever. But it's nice to kind of like evolve past that and be at a place to where now the business is trending in a positive direction, and everybody is paid in a way that they deserve, and we're on the up and up.
Wow, man. And speaking of doubt and mental health in general, in a recent interview with Split Life, I believe,
Hmm.
you mentioned recently that you suffered from black mold poisoning.
Yep, still am.
How? Wow, really? So
Yeah.
how do you manage to like start the recovery for that? And what was the impact of just recovering in general on your mental health?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and I've learned this over the last year and a half that I've been trying to heal from it. When it comes to the mold poisoning, there's so much that the mold does to you internally, and depending upon the individual, it may impact you more than others. I'm one of those that was pretty well impacted, but I've also heard and met some people that have been even worse impacted. So it just kind of depends.
Hmm.
Now, in regards to my particular healing process, there's been a lot of focus on trying to kill all the toxins within my body, try to heal my gut from all the issues that the toxins have caused. It's made me allergic to certain foods. It's caused hair loss, really bad breathing issues, vision loss. It's caused, again, like inflammation from my gut pretty much going to shit from the
Hmm.
mold. There's a million different things that have really been caused from the mold, but those are some of the main ones. And so more recently, my diet has been more disciplined and more strict than ever. In fact, I was less strict on bodybuilding preps than I am now, just trying to recover from mold. But that being said, I've learned a lot about ingredients and just overall discipline, and now I feel like I'm making some headway because I've learned about things that I'm allergic
Hmm.
to, and it's allowed me to kind of evolve a little bit more from the standpoint of somebody that cares a lot about health. So I'm excited to kind of get through this and be able to apply some of my new habits to a healthy body as opposed to a recovering one.
Yeah, I mean, um, as someone who's like also suffered through a longer term injury, I kind of understand.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not a wrestler, but in the sport that I used to play, I did suffer a long term injury, and it really does impact your mental health just as much as it
Hmm.
impacts your physical health. So,
Yeah.
how was it like bouncing back from being from the lowest of lows to where you are now?
Yeah, man. So it's never perfect, but I would say the month of August was probably my worst month of it all when it came to all of this. Leading up to August, I did my best to try to manage both wrestling, weight training, coaching, obviously, and then obviously healing from the mold. And it
Wow.
was doable.
Yeah.
It wasn't great, but it was doable. August, it was when it started to become seemingly undoable, and maybe that's a lapse in mental toughness on my end. But August was definitely my worst month.
Mm.
That being said, uh, the month of August, I started to really realize how much dependency I have on fitness and working out and wrestling and just feeling like I'm a capable athlete. My entire life has been basically dedicated to my production on an athletic sense. Even intellectually, the mold affects you from an intellectual standpoint as well. Brain fog is real, memory
Yeah.
loss is real, all these different things, and so for the first time in my entire life, I think I felt very hopeless because I was doing the majority of the right things on a dietary front and a supplement front. And if anything, I felt like I was getting worse. And so I felt very hopeless from the standpoint of just trying to be myself, but also from the standpoint of, hey, I have this kind of big goal of being in the WWE one day. And if I don't fix this mold issue, like I can guarantee I will never make it. And when
Hmm.
it comes to goal setting and stuff like that, you never want to like manifest you never accomplishing something. But I was also kind of just being realistic, like, hey, if I do not improve from this current state, there is no way I will be able to function in the WWE with their travel schedule, with what I need to look like, with what I need to perform like, all those things. I was sleeping 14, 16 hours a day. I would go and train a client for an hour, and it felt like I had, been working out all day. I just felt exhausted. I could barely keep my eyes open. I became very, even more introverted than I already am. I became almost, I had a lot of depressive symptoms, from an isolation standpoint to an overall mood standpoint to my willingness to try to do things that were productive. And, even like I say my diet was good at that time, which on certain days it was, but on certain days where my mental health had took a hit, I was like, dude, fuck it. What's the point? I'm just going to fucking have cookies and pizza and whatever. What's the point? I'm not getting better anyways. And that inevitably made my my symptoms worse. But it was a very toxic cycle during that month. And so now the biggest change that I made more recently is taking out all dairy and poultry, so I don't eat any dairy or eggs anymore. And I found out that that was actually one of the bigger allergies that I had accumulated from the mold poisoning. And so now I'm feeling a hell of a lot better. So I'm
Congrats.
hoping. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm not healed yet, but I'm hoping to continue to improve.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wish you a speedy recovery, like speedier than
Thanks,
you've
man.
already been doing.
I
But
appreciate it.
just one last question before I let
Yeah,
you
man.
go. So obviously, with this injury that we've been talking about for a while, uh, a bunch of different people also suffer with their own injuries. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone who went to something similar to you, like has this injury that they feel like they
Mhm.
can't escape from?
Are we referring to like some of my knee injuries or the mold thing, or just in general?
Just injuries in general, something that would take someone out from action for a while.
Yeah, great question. So there's two ways to kind of answer this question. One on a physical front, and then two on a mental front. On a physical front, when it comes to injury, let's just use my knee injuries for example. The biggest piece of advice that I can give to anybody dealing with a physical injury, in my case, it was a knee. Whether it's a shoulder, a neck, a back, or whatever the case may be, regardless of how impactful it may be on a physical or mental standpoint, it is in your best interest to get that particular injury moving and strengthening as soon as you possibly can. So, depending upon the severity of the injury, that might be a little bit longer than others. But in both cases of my knee injury, as soon as I could even put a little bit of weight or movement in my knee, I was doing it. And obviously I have a fair amount of experience in the background of like rehab and stuff like that. But it's important to attack the rehab process as soon as you can. Let's say, for example, that you're having to get a surgery. One of the biggest mistakes that people make. Let's say I hurt my knee and I schedule surgery a month later. One of the biggest mistakes people make is like, all right, well, I'm getting surgery, then I'm just gonna, what does it matter? I'm not going to do anything, and they'll basically not work out at all, leading up into the surgery. Where the rehab process, to a large degree, begins even before something surgical, or even if you're not having surgery, it begins right away. But you can try your best to keep as much muscle mass as you can, as much strength as you can, to access as much range of motion in a given joint as you can before you enter surgery. And that will set you up for a better rehab process coming out of surgery. So, the general point there on a physical level, get straight to rehab as soon as you can. And rehab can be something as simple just flexing your foot up and down, or bending a knee, or doing some light squats in a hot shower or a hot tub. Something as simple as basic as that. The sooner you can get on a rehab regimen, the better. Do not wait, and do not listen to anyone that says you need to wait for an extended period of time. The second point on a mental scale is understanding that you are going to have a flurry of ups and downs. So knowing that they're going to happen when you experience the downs, you shouldn't be as surprised as what somebody that is new to an injury might be. So God forbid I get injured again, right? And I know I have to rehab it. Okay, I already this sucks. Like there's no way about it. This sucks,
Mm-hmm.
but it sucks and we can't do anything about it. So that being said, the next point is you're going to have your high days, you're going to see a lot of progress, and then you're going to have your low days where you realize that you're a shell of what you once were, and it's going to take a hell of a lot of work to get back to that point. So understanding that you're going to have these low days and understanding that it's a natural part of the process makes the process more tolerable than it would be if you are constantly phased negatively by the days that are harder, right? You have to understand that the days that are harder are just kind of part of the process. And the second coin to that is just simply one thing that I picked up during this last one is as long as the process itself seems during it, as soon as you're out of it, it'll kind of come to you how quick it actually was. I remember there was a time of maybe 2 to 3 weeks where I was kind of between a wheelchair and crutches, and that like point in time seemed like the longest, right? I was like, it was a daily struggle every single day dragged. It felt like I was in it forever. But then when I look back at it, it was literally only like 2 to 3 weeks before I was limping around, kind of walking again. So as long as the process seems in the thick of it, when you come out of it, it's actually easy to see how quick some of this stuff actually occurs. So
Mm-hmm.
just keeping a realistic scope on A, expect the bad days and flow with the good days, and then B, being able to understand that in the grand scheme of life, the rehab process is a lot shorter than what we even give it credit for.
Yeah, and with that being said, thank you all for watching, and thank you, Jimmy, for joining us today. If
Absolutely, man.
there's anyone or anything that you want to shout out, you have the stage. Go ahead, man.
No, man, just want to shout out you and your show. I love what you're doing, man. I appreciate you reaching out, and I can't wait to see your show continue to evolve. And just please keep in touch because I'm excited for you, man. Thank you for the
Will
support, and
do,
I
sir.
hope
Thank
to
you
do
very
the
much. I
same back.
appreciate it. 100%.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And guys, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube and rate this podcast 5 stars on Spotify. Go follow our Instagram. And with that, thank you all so much for listening. We hope to see you same time next week.
Yes, sir.